Can there be such thing as an Israeli peace activist?
That's a great question. You know, in the US and in Israel, people love to tag us as radical.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm like calling it apartheid and I am
Right.
an anti-occupation and I refused to serve in the Israeli army and all these things that to me feel the most basic things you can do if you want to call yourself a peace activist. Because like, I mean, how can we ever reach equality and justice if I don't use my privilege to change the paradigm?
Welcome to Friday Night Semites, where we hope that Israel hasn't invaded another country by the time we finish this episode.
No guarantees, bro.
Yeah, it's Friday night. How you feeling, Sammy?
Feeling all right.
Yeah, I want to ask a question for today's episode that people have been asking me. They say, what I don't understand is if we had a ceasefire, that would mean negotiating for the hostages' release, right? And bringing the hostages home. But why don't we actually hear more in the U.S. of the pro-Palestine ceasefire, solidarity movement, whatever you want to call it, actually talking about the hostages? I don't hear any mention of the hostages, Josh. I don't hear you guys. Do you guys not care about the hostages? And so since they asked me that, I decided to ask you, Sammy.
Oh, man, so kind of you. Thank you.
I'm a good ally here.
Thank you. You know, I guess it depends on who you're listening to. I've definitely heard bring them home. I've heard that a lot.
Yeah.
You know, I've heard a lot of people who tie ceasefire to a hostage deal. I mean, if you understand what the whole concept of the ceasefire deal is, you know that that's attached to it.
For sure.
I think the reason why you don't hear that explicitly from a lot of people on the pro-Palestine side is because when we think of hostages, we think of not only the remaining 100-ish Israeli hostages, but the thousands of Palestinian hostages who are held unjustly in Israeli prisons.
That's right.
And we know that when the Israeli side says bring them home, they're not talking about them.
Yeah.
We know that when our government is talking about bring them home, they're not talking about them. And we know that when it comes to brokering a deal to bring all the hostages home, that there's some justification for those people to remain locked up. They say, well, some of them are a threat. We're talking about kids who threw rocks.
I saw a Palestinian woman who was in jail because of a Facebook post.
Yep.
She was from the West Bank. She wrote a Facebook post after her husband was killed by the IDF, and she wrote something like, "We will meet again soon one day."
Yeah.
And she's been locked up for 11 months without a trial.
Right.
Is that not a hostage?
And there's countless stories like that.
Yeah.
And there are a number of people who say, no, these are prisoners. They've been convicted of crimes, which is not true. Most of them haven't even been tried yet. And we're talking about thousands. We're talking about nearly 10,000 people that we know of who are unjustly locked up.
So I think that's one part of it. I think there's a second part of it, which I know a little bit more from the Jewish American side, the Jewish American pro-ceasefire side. Even here in Oakland last fall, when 500 of us were arrested at the federal building in Oakland, and it was a Jewish march, it was Jewish sit-in, which was stop the bombing in Gaza. It was really beautiful. But there was very little, there was almost no mentioning of the hostages, of the Israeli hostages.
Sure, yeah.
And I was like, man, even at a Jewish American protest, so I asked one of my friends, who was one of the organizers, I said, just between me and you and my future podcast listeners, why is that the case? She said, we don't want to be looked at making this like a both sides, all lives matter type situation.
Right.
And on one case, I get that because, you know, it's like Israeli lives are so much more valued in the West, in the Western media. And so you're trying to make sure that Palestinian lives have some equality. But you're now diminishing, if you're diminishing the Israeli lives, like the part about that I didn't get was at the end of the day, what we are trying to say is all lives do fucking matter. And like when I've gone to Black Lives Matter protests, when Latinos are killed by the cops, or when a white guy with mental health issues was killed by the cops. And so like there's a way to do that holds the both and. But I think it's hard and people get scared of saying I'm on one side more than the other, and it's hard to do.
It's sad. It's really sad that this is where we are, and unfortunately, not as a justification, but I think it's because of the dehumanization of Palestinians that we've arrived at this place. And no matter, I've talked to plenty of pro-Palestinian people and Palestinian people who do sincerely want the Israeli hostages to come home, but because there's no mention of the Palestinian hostages, it's like, why would we even bring that up? But I will tell you, no matter how much you can accuse a pro-Palestinian person or a Palestinian person of not caring about the hostages, no one cares less about the hostages than Netanyahu.
For sure.
We've seen that. And, and in fact, I blame him. He's set the care for the hostages so low that this is why we as a society are not even mentioning them in a lot of our dialogue. And it's unfortunate, but it's really because of his policies that have shown no regard for actually getting them back that we are here.
So I think I would just like to propose a new slogan that that we can say to both Netanyahu and to our U.S. officials. It's really simple, and I'm sure everyone will agree on it, as we do on most things. Free Palestine, free all the hostages, all Semites matter.
All Semites matter.
All Semites matter.
I like that. Even though not all. I don't even think all the hostages are Semites, but yeah. I like that, and I don't think there's anything wrong with saying bring them all home with the all underlined. You know what I mean? Bring the Israeli hostages home. Bring the thousands of Palestinian hostages home. The settlers in the West Bank who are squatting on Palestinian land. Let's bring them home too. You know what I mean?
Back home to Brooklyn.
Yeah, back home to Brooklyn. The astronauts at the ISS. Let's bring them home. You know what I mean? Let's bring them all home.
All right. Well, speaking of home and complicated questions, we have a great guest tonight. Should we bring her on? Should we bring her home?
Let's do it.
We're going to bring her home. We're going to bring our guest home tonight. She is a self-described traitor comedian, which is our favorite kind.
Our favorite, yeah.
She is an Israeli performer, activist, performs in Hebrew, Arabic, and English. I hope so, for the sake of us today on the show. And she's been an activist in the pro-Palestine solidarity movement within Israel. And that's a perspective we don't normally get here in the U.S. So let's bring her on. Noam Shuster-Eliassi, please come on down. Welcome to the show. Thank you for coming.
Hi.
Since we're hosting you in our home, we have some Semitic treats. So we got, for our Israeli guests, we have some watermelon.
Oh, watermelon. Israeli watermelon.
Yeah. I'll let you guys can figure that out. And some pomegranate seeds, and of course.
Nice.
Have you ever had pita and hummus before?
Oh, no, but I'm open to trying. Is it it looks like a paste? Should we fight over who invented it?
For sure, that always goes really well.
Nobody's trying to claim pomegranates, right? Not one person.
Persians are kind of obsessed with pomegranates.
Right.
Well, I'm gonna have a couple. I'm gonna claim some pomegranate seeds. That's a good way to start. You have a one-woman show.
That's right.
With a great title called Coexistence My Ass.
Yeah, it started as a joke. I didn't really think it will stay the name of my show.
So I wanted to ask you, what do you and your ass have against coexistence?
Well, the show is about coexistence and my ass. So it's not necessarily,
Two different topics.
I came up with the name after I started doing comedy. A few crazy things happened really, really quickly. One of the crazy things was that I got an email from Harvard University.
Okay.
And they were like, hey, Noam, we've heard about the way you use comedy to bridge between people and, do the humor as a tool, as a vehicle for coexistence and stuff. And I was just shocked that things are so bad at Harvard that they're calling a comedian. And they asked me to propose a project. And so I wanted to set the tone so that they know what I want to do. So I proposed working on a one-woman show. And then I just came up with the title. I was like, Coexistence My Ass, send. And then 10 days later, they were like, Harvard University approves Coexistence My Ass.
Wow. That's how you get into Harvard.
Yeah.
That's how you make it to Harvard these days. So can you tell us what's the show about? And
show, working on, I'm sure you both know this, working on a 1 hour, a one-woman show that is kind of has a thread and stuff. It's really complicated and complex. And so many things have happened. I started working on it 5 years ago. And I actually just finished filming it.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like 2 weeks ago in Montreal.
Congrats.
Montreal is such a great comedy city. It's really, really great. The audience were amazing, and we filmed it, and it's actually going to be in a documentary that an amazing filmmaker, Lebanese-Canadian filmmaker Amber Faris, is making. Her previous film is called Speed Sisters. It's about Palestinian female race car drivers.
Okay.
Yeah, so we wrapped the documentary and we filmed the entire one-woman show. And the one-woman show, it deals with my story and my identity growing up in the only community in the country where Palestinians and Jews live together by choice.
Right.
So I grew up in a very political household, and my parents, first of all, I come from a mixed background. My father is son of Holocaust survivors from Romania.
Okay.
And my mom is an Iranian Jew born in Iran. So I have one set of grandparents who gave me Holocaust trauma, and the other set of grandparents, Persian carpets.
Nice.
So yeah.
You're winning on both sides.
Yeah, yeah. And my parents are sort of like a mixed Jewish couple to begin with. There was a lot of like internal Jewish racism there. Like my Ashkenazi grandmother, when my dad met this like darker skinned Iranian Jewish woman and brought her home, she was very racist to her. She said the N-word in Yiddish, which is Schwarze.
Yeah.
She called my mom. And that was also a learning experience for me, because I grew up looking like my mom, and there was in the background the story that on one hand my grandmother is really traumatized. She survived a Nazi labor camp.
Right.
And on the other hand, she's being racist towards my mom. So I was like, that's confusing.
Yeah.
Very, very confusing.
Yeah.
I think also internal Jewish hierarchies are confusing to people.
Yeah.
People don't understand, the dynamics and the very, very difficult hierarchies we have among Jews, in Israel and also in the diaspora.
If you want to know where I am, I'm at the top.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Oh,
saying?
I already knew that.
Just so you know.
That's why I'm working with you.
Yeah, that's why we're on the couch.
Yeah, Noam asked me to work together a while back. I was like, I'm waiting for Josh to get
For
back.
sure.
Yeah, I was like,
Yeah.
I don't have a work permit. He's like, let me find someone who has a passport, better passport than you. When I was really, really young in the first Intifada, my father used to get called for army reserve drafts, and he used to refuse and go in and out of the Israeli military prison. And so I grew up in a political household with a refusnik, conscientious objector father. My parents did not hide anything from me, not the internal, racism. My mother being like a strong Mizrahi woman who was facing, her mother tongue is Persian and my mother tongue is Hebrew. She had to erase certain parts of her Iranian Jewish identity in order to survive in the, contained Israeli identity.
Yeah.
And none of that was spared for me until, they reached the highest level of leftist parents. Leftist parents have to be very, very embarrassing.
Oh, yeah, I have a couple. I have two of them.
My parents have competitions with their leftist neighbors who is more leftist. And my mom's neighbor is like, well, my kid just came out as non-binary. And my mom looks at her neighbor and is like, my son converted to Islam. So they moved when I was 7 years old to the only community in the country where Israelis and Palestinians live together.
Neve Shalom.
Yes.
Neve Shalom, Wahat, as-Salam.
Yeah, if you type it on your
research.
iPhone, yeah. But if you type it on your iPhone, it says Never Shalom.
Oh, wow.
So I grew up in Never Shalom. That's the name of my next show, actually.
Wow. I think half of our audience got that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Neve Shalom, Wahat, as-Salam. It means Oasis of Peace.
It means Oasis of Peace.
And so that's obviously very different than the rest of growing up in Israel. I'm guessing from the name of your title of your show, it didn't all work out.
It didn't all work out. Some of it worked out. This past year, I got to actually appreciate it more. I mean, things...
Why is that?
I think when things get so radicalized and so extremely, extremely difficult, then there's something about the community that I always come back to. And we have a basic, there is a basic kind of will to live together.
Yeah.
And everything in the community is, declared to be equal. The school, we learn Arabic and Hebrew together, and both identities come into, an equal expression. For example, the first Independence Day, I remember when we moved to the village, the first Independence Day, as a little girl, I know that on Independence Day there's a barbecue and I get kebab. But my dad sat me down, I was like 7 years old, he sits me down and he tells me that we're not gonna have a barbecue and I'm not getting kebab. And I was really upset because I love my kebab.
Of course.
And he said, we live in a different place now, our neighbors are Palestinian. For them, it's not a day of barbecue, it's a day of collective mourning, collective grief. It's a day of catastrophe of the Nakba.
Right.
It was the first time that I was taught about the Nakba as a 7-year-old.
Wow.
And then I realized that I'm smelling barbecue from the Palestinian neighbor's house.
They're still having their
They're still
barbecue.
eating.
It's like,
Yeah.
you know, it's just a normal... so I run over and I'm like, can I have a kebab? No agenda, no independence, just hang it. You know, as a little girl, when you are taught something, it kind of becomes normal very, very quickly.
Right.
Kids are like that. And I remember learning that what is normal to me now, like Palestinian identity, speaking fluent Palestinian dialect, knowing that my best friend, her grandfather lost everything in 1948.
Right.
And it's my duty to know about it because it's literally part of my life.
Yeah.
And when you encounter your cousins in the society outside, I realized what an outsider I am becoming very, very early on in my life. And also I realized that I am sort of like the kids in the village, we're becoming like these poster children of coexistence and peace.
Right.
We moved there in the heat of the Oslo agreements. There was so much attention on
This
this,
is like the mid-90s.
Mid-90s, yeah. And I remember like flowers. I remember ceremonies. I remember handing flowers to Hillary Clinton, and
You handed flowers to Hillary Clinton?
I did.
She was just like walking by. You just handed her flowers.
She was this was after Rabin was assassinated. After Rabin was assassinated. And Netanyahu was the prime minister for the first time. And here I am, 37 years old, and he's still the prime minister.
Oh, God.
How depressing.
Yeah.
My goodness. Oh, this is so depressing. It's still in primary school. So Hillary Clinton had this like royal visit, and, you know, they want to shake the hands of like the Palestinian and Jewish kids that are like studying together. And
You never want to shake a Clinton's hand. That's what we've learned lately. So just.
But then there was Jane Fonda and Richard Gere, and then Roger Waters performed in the Oasis of Peace at some point. And then I got scholarships. Like I went to Brandeis University and everything. So it's really like almost like a peace industry, you know. And at some point I was like, what if this gets solved? Like, what will I do? What kind of scholarships will I get? Like,
Right.
Yeah, you got really, really worried. So part of my show is making fun of the peace industry and how much of the peace industry is a feel-good industry where, you know, it's like almost the optics of coexistence. And as I grew up, and because my parents are very, very political as well, and and realizing, you know, what the elephant in the room is, that we cannot talk about coexistence between the oppressor and the oppressed. I cannot, after 18 years of, you know, growing up in this village with Palestinians, with Palestinian mothers and educators and teachers who are, you know, like my mothers, I can't just at the age of 18 put on uniform and walk around with an M16 and come up to their house and be like, hey,
Right.
can we still live together in peace?
Yeah.
I'm just wearing the uniform of the army that is stopping your families at checkpoints, like, let's make dinner.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of my work also, you know, in comedy is trying to like use comedy to see how can I demonstrate an alternative, how can I be an alternative, how can I use my identity and my languages in order to kind of propose something different without my previous life, which, you know, I worked in the UN and I've been an activist for so many years, and so much of the work had to stay in very like polite.
Right.
You know,
What kind of
polite
work did you do at the UN?
I worked for a peace building initiative that was doing, actually they were doing quite unique work than other like traditional peace stuff. The work that we were doing was to counter-extremism in the Israeli society, like under the radar. So I was roughly working with 90% of Israeli society. No, but we had programs with, ultra-Orthodox rabbis and religious nationalists and kind of people that have a lot of constituency who are potentially very dangerous, and we need to talk to them because the left has tendency to speak to ourselves and to preach to the choir.
I don't know what you're talking about. We always like to talk to other people here.
Yeah. Seriously. And you won't believe it, but as soon as we got to very influential people, and the UN were like, oh, these people are actually, they might do something, they were like, we're out. Yeah, they closed the program. That was in 2017. When this new Israeli government was formed, like the most religious, nationalist, dangerous, fascist government, I got a call from my former UN boss, and he's like, you were right, we needed to stop those people. Like, these are the people that are now in power and they're most dangerous to everyone. And it was really, really tough, like too late. It's like a very traditional UN behavior to like be late.
Too little, too late.
Too little, too late. Yeah.
Since you mentioned elephants in the room, I mean, let's talk about it. What is it like being an Israeli over the last year and seeing what your country, with funding from our country, with bombs that we pay for, what it's doing? What is that? We hear a lot, we've heard from a lot of Palestinians and other folks. What do you see? How has it affected where you're coming from?
It's been tough. It's been hard. It's also hard to be here and talk about it. Yeah. Because the freedom that I feel talking about it here, I don't feel like this at home. It's almost, it's impossible. If for my friends who are Palestinian citizens of Israel, it's impossible. They are completely on mute, and they are being arrested for liking the wrong post, posting something, saying the wrong thing, and getting arrested. And we're seeing that the government in Israel is suppressing the hostage families, as you said before. And I knew that the space for people like me is shrinking. I mean, I knew that. Yeah. But to experience it is a whole other level, because you don't know what will happen or who will find a post. Or in early on in October, when I snapped out of like the shock and I realized that there is that immediately, like without letting any of us mourn the people that we actually knew and lost on October 7th, that the government is using our grief for an immediate revenge campaign without even letting us for a second to figure out what's going on. I remember like shaking my head like this, like, no, I'm like, get a hold of yourself. Like you have to like respond to what is happening now. Yeah. And immediately when I started posting about it, and immediately when we started realizing what Israel is about to do to Gaza and to all of Palestinians, really, my social media and my name was published in like a right-wing Telegram group. They moved on pretty quickly, like they didn't, because everything was chaotic in the beginning. The fear was that like if they post your address, then you're in real physical, danger. They didn't post my address, so it stayed in the like social media,
How would they know your address anyways?
It gets leaked sometimes. They find it. There are some activists that they found their address, and they, either the police showed up and arrested, or activists like are mobilized to go and like attack.
But it happens here too. Where they dox. People get doxxed.
Yeah. And
it's scary.
It's really scary. You see it happening to people in the U.S. I think before October 7th, me and other, Jewish Israeli activists at home, we wanted to think that when things will be so bad, that maybe we will be the ones to be able to provide some kind of protection, some kind of a voice, some kind of leverage, so that things won't get out of hand, and to realize how powerless you are, and to realize how scary it is and how scared you are. It's really a devastating experience. One of the things that keeps me going in terms of my conversations is with Iranian artists that are in exile and had to leave Iran, is like when did you realize that you cannot be an artist, or you cannot be, the person that you are from, in your homeland, in,
Right.
where you want to be, where your family is. And when do you say, okay, that's it, there is no more space for people like me. And if I want to be effective, or if I even want to have a voice, then I have to leave, and do it from outside. So when do you get to that place? And I'm thinking a lot about exile these days, but I'm also immediately, when I think about it, I get very scared, and I said, but I can't leave all these people.
Right.
And I can't, so it's very, very, it's difficult. It's difficult to understand that you are living amongst people who are supporting genocidal intentions, genocidal thoughts, justifications for, genocidal actions. And when you realize that it's hard.
Yeah.
There's a question I wanted to ask you at the very beginning, but we somehow got out of order.
Yeah.
Can there be such thing as an Israeli peace activist?
That's a great question. I think in order to be truthful with yourself, and in order to really make a change, you have to do things that, in my opinion, are not radical. But in the US and in Israel, people love to tag us as radical.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm like, if I'm calling it apartheid, and I am an anti-occupation, and I refused to serve in the Israeli army, and all these things that to me feel the most basic things you can do if you want to call yourself a peace activist. Because how can we ever reach equality and justice if I don't use my privilege to change the paradigm?
Yeah.
To break down, because you and I stand on stage, and it's not like, oh, look, it's amazing, an Israeli and a Palestinian comic.
Yeah.
You would you have booked me on your show if that was my thing?
If what was your thing?
Oh, look, I'm an Israeli comic and Sami is booking me on his show. Look, we can be...
Right, and then you go on to
Comedy
be like, and we have the right to defend ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we worked together last year in Geneva.
Yeah.
Of all places.
Of all places.
Right.
Yeah.
It was non-conventional.
It was...
How was your UN peace plan together? How'd that work out?
Well, it didn't work out too well. I mean, we met up in March of 2023.
Yeah.
And that's why, you're talking about, like fake peace and stuff. And I remember you talking about it then. It was like, we did work for, it was a very nice, great people, very nice organization. But there was some requests they were like, don't use the word apartheid. Don't talk about the obviously glaringly flagrant problems that are going on there. This is about peace. And we discussed it. We're like, how can we ever achieve peace without an honest look at what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, sadly, a couple months later, what comes to fruition is the results of years of sweeping it under the rug.
Yeah. And I think that's why, when I left the UN, this was one of the things that, I made a commitment, because I haven't performed really in front of an Israeli audience for a really long time, because I just, this past year has been impossible. And, but, beforehand, I remember being sometimes in front of pretty mainstream Israeli audiences and pushing it. And I don't think if I didn't have the tool of comedy, I wouldn't, maybe I wouldn't be able, to do it as much. So,
I became familiar with you a while back when there was the story at the beginning of the pandemic with, can you tell us what happened? Because I remember that's how I became aware of you.
In the Corona Hotel?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That was crazy. I was at Harvard at the time, working on the Coexistence My Ass show. And it was pretty much amazing. I was in the US trying out material. Maz Jobrani put me on his shows. I was touring with him everywhere. I did the Kennedy Center in front of 3,500 people. The Kennedy Center reached out to me that they wanted the premiere of Coexistence My Ass, when I premiere it, to be at the Kennedy Center. I thought that I was and then the pandemic started, and the president of Harvard was basically non-Americans, get the fuck out of campus, basically. So I made my way back home.
And you're but I'm Israeli.
I know.
Right. Shouldn't there be an exception for me? Right.
No,
we're the 51st state.
I swear, it was just get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
We have nothing to do with you. They had no idea what was going on. And I get home and I got COVID on the way from the US.
Oh, nice.
And the ministry,
a little parting gift.
I know, yeah, and I get all the, you know, like all the side effects.
Yeah.
Side effects?
Yeah.
Yeah, side effects. Okay, yeah, sometimes I'm like too many languages in my head. And the Ministry of Health calls me and they're like, Noam, you have COVID and you are patient number 3,555. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like,
That was how many people you performed for at the Kennedy Center.
I know. And I'm like, Jews are numbering themselves now. Like, why are you numbering the patients in Israel? What's going on? And I was sent to recover at a hotel in East Jerusalem that was repurposed for a Corona hotel. So basically all the people that were Israelis and Palestinians who were like from East Jerusalem, Palestinian citizens of Israel, ultra-Orthodox Jews, secular Jews, Jews from everyone, we were just stuck in this hotel together.
Isn't that beautiful? COVID didn't discriminate.
COVID didn't discriminate.
COVID brought you guys together.
And on top of that, we, like, everyone were equals at this hotel. Like,
equally low.
Equally sick. Seriously, we couldn't leave the hotel. We got the same sheets, the same towels, the same food, the same shitty food with no taste or smell. This same thing. And, you know, when I got there, in the reception, they were like, Noam, enjoy your time.
Yeah.
You're here till you recover. And by the way, there is like a Zumba in the lobby in an hour. And I'm like, what? So I get to the lobby and it's like everyone just like doing Zumba in the lobby. And it was some kind of like a 5-star Oasis of Peace, like where I grew up, but on steroids.
Yeah.
And not just like the peace, like activists like my parents who like want to live together. It was like people who would have never thought that they will be spending weeks together.
Do you keep in touch with any of those people?
No.
Okay. All right. That was a quick answer.
It was an oasis.
Fuck no.
Yes, yeah.
No, because I left the hotel and things, everything just like, became so, the same and worst ever since. But those few weeks in the hotel, I think I got a glimpse of something that I've never experienced before, of like what happens when you're in the same situation with like getting the same resources, getting the same access to the same things. And the hierarchies are kind of blurry because of this extreme situation that we're in. People were taking care of each other in an extraordinary way. And I heard like very, very radical conversations between people who would otherwise never come across. There was this Algerian Jewish, like very like Orthodox Jewish guy who was speaking to a Palestinian from East Jerusalem, and they were basically talking about the ways in which like Zionism erased his Algerian identity, and how like Palestinians and like Jews from, Arab speaking countries could have had a different fate. And they're both like, they're not coming from like my world of like blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you guys, by the end of this pandemic, I'm gonna be out of comedy material, like stop this. Yeah. And then NPR did like a huge
they did a story on it.
A story on it from the hotel. I was like recording with them, and that was pretty cool. And I wrote a script for like a feature film with an amazing Palestinian film director, and we finished the script, and it's really, really good. But we're not gonna. I don't know if we're gonna do it now, because do you think someone would want to watch a film about
Israel-Palestine conflict in a hotel Corona?
People are so over
it's a lighthearted romantic comedy. Sounds like, get Brad Pitt and you're good to go.
Yeah. No, but I remember, we talked, I think we
I had a podcast at the time, and then another co-host, and my co-host at the time.
Wow. How was the other host?
Said it was a medical podcast. We talked about medical things, and we were talking to a lot of people who had different COVID experiences. And, and she said, oh, look at this comedian had a story on NPR, and we should have her on the show. And I was like, yeah. So I think we tried, but you were different time zones, so it didn't work out.
Yeah. And then we had the show in Geneva together.
Yeah.
And I think very early on in October, we went live on Instagram together.
We did a live, yeah. You were the first person I like really spoke to.
Yeah. I got so many comments and so many.
This is after October 7th last year?
Yeah, this was like October 10th or something like that.
Yeah.
Because I saw some of your posts. You had lost some friends, and I checked in with you. Said how are you doing? And we ended up doing a live. where, you know, I just asked her like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, what do you know? And yeah, we ended up putting it out there. A lot of people saw it.
Yeah. A lot of comments, a lot of people saw it. You know, I don't know if I got a chance to tell you, like, I really appreciated it. It was really, I think, one of the things that really, I mean, there was so much shit happening, so many friends stop talking to you,
Right.
so many people around you just turn against you, so much loss and so much uncertainty and ongoing grief. And I remember this, you know, us doing this live is something that was really like, okay, there's still room to talk. There's still people that, you know, this kind of relationship will go on for a long, long time. And, you know.
Yeah, a lot of people said they were very thankful for that conversation.
Did you get some bad comments also?
Yeah, well, we were in a live, so I remember watching some
like,
horrible things.
Fuck you, Sammy.
Yeah. There was a lot of people.
I only wrote 5
You'd
of
see
the
Palestinian
bad
flags, Israeli flags, and then you'd be like, "Fuck you," and then you know, it's like you're up there crying, and there's people like, "Go back home, settler," and I'm like, just give her a minute, you know. So yeah, you always have that, but like it was interesting. I mean, I was curious to know because, you know, and I'll ask this question now. It's like, as an activist, as somebody who's been devoting your life to this thing, like, how did you see October 7th change the actions of the activist community that you surround yourself in? Did some, you know, end up going a different course, and you know, did some obviously, like yourself, keep, you know, fighting the good fight?
Yeah, it's very, very hard to, you know, to speak on all fronts, but I would say that in general, like, we lost. I mean, first of all, I don't know how, like, Hamas targeted so many anti-occupation activists and people who were part of the movement. And what people don't understand from abroad is, like, when you are an anti-occupation activist in Israel and you are already in a place where nobody really likes you and you're doing something so unpopular, because the level of how the occupation is normalized in Israel, people are like, no, but why are you even doing comedy about this? Why are you even talking about this? Like, you know, just like live your life. And, you know, these problems will never get solved. And so when, you know, for example, a friend of mine who died in one of the kibbutzes, his name is Chaim, and every weekend he would go to the West Bank and he would protect Palestinian shepherds from settler violence. He was part of this, like, solidarity group that were using their bodies as like a, and he wrote his PhD about the danger in the rise of religious, you know, nationalist, religious Zionist movements. Like, he really dedicated his life because he's also coming from, like, a religious background. And when him and people like him, you know, were massacred on October 7th, I don't think people realize how much, for the right wing, how it played out for them perfectly. They were using the deaths of people who are and saying, like, and pretty much using the momentum for other, like, liberal leftist people for saying, like, look, these people loved the Arabs, worked with Palestinians,
and look what happened to them.
And look what happened to them. And not only that, they were signing missiles with, like, their names. And that is, like, that is so devastating, because and I know most of these people, the last thing they would have wanted is for a stupid fascist person to send a missile to Gaza with their name, you know, signed on it. And then we lost people to the, you know, to the right wing or to the fascism very, 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 very easily. You know, you're kind of like, fuck this.
As an activist as well?
People who were outspoken, people who are scholars, journalists, whatever. You know, you suddenly see on Facebook
become pro-war very quickly.
And your trauma response is like, no, I care about my kids. That's it. I'm done with other kids. This is the response. And so, okay, so this person is gone and this person is gone. And okay, I'm even more alone than I was before. So what's happening? First of all, my Palestinian friends, they're on mute. And for the first few weeks or months, we didn't even know when we're gonna be able to protest. And you watch young people immediately put on their uniform and just go. And you're like, where are you going? the same people who are sending you right now are, the government and the army that are responsible ultimately for not, for bringing October 7th to us. Obviously Hamas, executed the massacres, but the people in charge that are responsible are the same people who are now sending all these young people, and young people are just going and going and going, and it just felt like a storm that you can't stop.
A week after October 7th, I called my mom and I said, because we have extended family that I don't really know, with friends, and I said, fuck, do we know anyone? And the one person, and I know was Vivian Silver.
Yeah.
And Vivian Silver was a peace activist, and they thought she'd been kidnapped. It turned out she was killed. And my mom said the same thing, which was Vivian would not want these motherfuckers to write her name, like no more bombs. Like she had been providing transportation and trying to do exchanges and all this. But, as a Jewish American, that's the only person I know personally. One of my best friends who's Palestinian lost 41 friends within 2 weeks. A guest that we had on recently lost 160 family members within a month. And when you see this, I know my job as a Jewish American is to convince Jewish Americans to stop being brainwashed by the Hasbara and the propaganda and the birthright and all this, and to start to learn the other side, and to stop going to fucking, AIPAC lobby day or whatever. I don't know what it's called. I assume it's called AIPAC
Are their
lobby
sandwiches
day.
really good? Why are people still drunk?
They got really good sandwiches. That's it. But I have no idea what are the conversations? Are there any arguments that get through to Israelis, to Jewish Israelis these days?
I can tell you that the way the hostage families are being treated has definitely had an impact on some people.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the propaganda machine that is convincing so many Israelis that, we can't compromise, and if we release the terrorists that are in Israeli prisons in exchange with Israeli hostages, the next October 7th is around the corner, because we will potentially release the next people who will commit the next October 7th. This propaganda machine...
By writing Facebook posts, if we release them,
and it's journalists and it's politicians and it's people who are, and sadly, I'm saying this very, very sadly, there are now remaining 100 and
97, I think.
97, and I think
of the Israeli hostages.
Of the Israeli hostages, and maybe 2 families or max 3 families are not pro-ceasefire.
Yeah.
So they're leave my kid there.
Yeah.
Do not release terrorists, And these 3 families are rotating between TV channels.
Right.
Oh, they're getting all the attention.
And then getting so much attention. And the rest of the, almost 100 families now are saying only a ceasefire, can save lives. And, that narrative that no, I'm sacrificing my children. Do not do any compromises. This is over. Do not send any signals that this was okay and now we're going to compromise and make an agreement because you kidnapped Israelis. And that is insane, because it demonizes the people who are protesting and who are trying to put pressure on the government to have a ceasefire. Most of my Palestinian friends at home who are Palestinian citizens in Israel have families in Gaza. I don't know if many people realize this, but my friends from Lid, from Jaffa, from Haifa, in 1948, the Zionist militias were basically expelling them.
Yeah.
They went to many, many places, and one of the places was Gaza.
Of course.
And so, because my life is so intertwined with Palestinians, while we were trying to figure out where Vivian is where Chaim is, where my comedy writer lost her nephew in the Nova Festival, the immediate images that were coming out of Gaza that were just like 1948, just like the Nakba, of people who we know, families of my best friends, who are packing up their stuff and escaping nowhere because they have nowhere to escape to. So you go from trying to understand what happened in the massacre, to realizing that there is another Nakba that is taking place and is going to take place. And the trauma of everyone is just exploding in front of you in such a tragic and horrific way. And I think, the biggest part was the normalizing of the pain, of the tragedy, of the silencing, of the police brutality if you go and protest, of silencing Palestinian voices inside Israel, of what is happening in the West Bank right now.
Yeah.
And the worst of it all, just like the complete dehumanization and no way to even comprehend, the destruction and the actions that we did in Gaza.
Yeah.
There's no way for a human mind to really understand. Like, we don't even still know what is happening there, because many of it is still under the rubble. Many of it is still like, there are no journalists from outside that can go and actually, and how much can Palestinian journalists or also have families to take care of?
There have been big protests, I know, in Tel Aviv, especially families of the hostages, and then other people saying, you need to cease fire. But sometimes how it gets interpreted here in the U.S.
No, it's not sometimes. It's very hostage focused.
Yeah. Well, but then you see people saying, well, the Israelis are only protesting because they care about their own hostages. For 11 months, they haven't been protesting the destruction in Gaza. So, I'm not on the ground. I don't know what's actually, what do you say to that question?
When Ariel Sharon was overseeing the Sabra and Shatila massacres,
Yeah.
there was a very famous demonstration in Tel Aviv that was called the 400,000 demonstration. There were 400,000 Israelis in the street that were protesting to end the Sabra and Shatila massacre.
That's like 1 out of every 10 people in the country or something.
Yeah, and I remember, I was just thinking to myself, when people were not really going into the streets very quickly, I was really obsessively reading about that demonstration, because I was like, what happens to a society that is changing so much? And I was speaking to a friend that said that basically everything can be blamed on October 7th now. Everything. It's always in the discourse. People who didn't have even place for compassion before October 7th would tell you, I don't have any more place for empathy, Before October 7th, when we had the judicial coup, if you remember, there were big protests
Right.
against this current government. We had some kind of a radical bloc, like an anti-occupation bloc within this huge protest. And we were there and we were shouting you can't ignore the elephant in the room.
Right.
And people would, liberal people who are against this government would come up to and be like, why are you bringing up the Palestinian issue?
Right.
Why are you bringing up the occupation? This has nothing to do with the judicial coup. We are fighting for a Jewish democracy. And
my favorite phrase.
Yeah, and because I'm being followed by a documentarist, and unfortunately there are all these footage of me going insane in this protest and saying you can't have democracy just for Jews.
Boom.
You can't.
Boom.
And it's and if you think that this insane status quo is sustainable to anyone, you have to be insane. And being proven right is not fun. It's really not fun. I really wanted to be proven wrong. We wanted something else to happen before all this death and destruction and trauma. And if that was a movement, the liberal, Zionist movement in Israel that is against the Netanyahu regime, but it's very, very hard to bring in the elephant in the room into that movement. If that was hard before October 7th, it almost became impossible after October 7th. The radical bloc, the anti-occupation bloc, we go to these protests, but there's no way for us to even have a watermelon shirt. My friend was arrested for wearing a watermelon t-shirt.
What keeps you hopeful nowadays?
Getting on an airplane.
Getting out of the country.
Yeah. Oh my God. Oof. What keeps me hopeful? Relationships. People who are fighting for each other. What keeps me hopeful is action, people who are committed and courageous, protests, courageous art, when people are able to actually say things even though it's very, very hard, and it's very, and we're full of grief, and we're kind of unable to create, but there is still, people who are able to create and to speak up. What keeps me hopeful? I got married last month.
Hey.
Woohoo, mazel tov.
All right. Yeah, give yourself mazel tov.
Thank you.
Yeah, good job. Well, you must be new because to marriage. If it's keeping you hopeful, you're just newly married. Shout out to my wife. I love you, honey.
How many years have you been married?
Let's not talk about that. Let's stick to safe topics like Palestine and Israel and me and Sammy's relationship.
No, but I mean, that kept me hopeful because it's annoying, but I carry a lot of shame. I always think like I need to do something, to speak up, to be an activist, there's no way that we're so helpless. Like we have to be, creating change and making change and fighting for freedom and all of this. And suddenly, in the midst of this despair, getting a chance to, see my community and my friends show up to celebrate something that is kind of personal, but also has some hope to it. I learned something about the human kind.
And with that?
Our tendencies towards life. I mean, in my wedding, there were friends of mine who have family in Gaza, a friend who lost his parents on October 7th, people who are dealing with some deep grief.
Yeah.
And they were there. They wanted to be there. They wanted to have a few hours where they just, dance and it was kind of wild to see it. It was a very wild experience to get married in the midst of all of this.
Yeah.
And you always look back kind of like in the books of history and you're like, how did people do this and this?
Yeah.
It was a week after Israel assassinated Ismail Haniyeh. So we were sure that, everybody were walking around and the government was like, an attack from Iran is about to happen. We don't know when, we don't know what. So there was an Iranian threat in my wedding, and it ended up just being my aunties, not the regime.
You gotta watch out for the aunties, though.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
The aunties, they've been waiting for so long for me to get married. My goodness. Yeah.
So how much? I mean, I know you were born in Israel.
Yeah.
Right, and raised in Israel. How much longer could you continue to live there with everything that's going on?
I want to be there. There are so many people that I love there. There are so many things to do. I think there are so many people who potentially could make this place a much, much, much better place. There are so many, Palestinians who are silenced, also Israeli Jews who don't want to see this continuing, who want to be part, to see an end to this. And there is a part of me that wants to be there to continue the fight until we can't fight anymore. There's a part of me that says, fuck it, I'm just going to fight from outside, and maybe my fight will be even louder and maybe more effective. And then I can come back. I don't know.
I read a different interview that you said you learned a lot when you went to Northern Ireland.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times Palestine, Israel is compared to South Africa. It's compared even to US interventions. You hear about India, Pakistan, and Kashmir. I was curious, what did you learn in Northern Ireland? Because that's like white people against white people. And so, and what can we learn from that situation?
Irish people, he just called you white people.
Oh yeah, I don't give a fuck. Come at me. Let's get some Guinness and Manischewitz. Let's go.
They do see parallels and they talk about them. That's why the Irish are so supportive of Palestinians.
Yeah.
And there are neighborhoods in Northern Ireland where there are Israeli flags in the Protestant side, and there are Palestinian flags in the Irish Catholic side.
Right.
And there are murals of Palestinian resistance, Palestinian prisoners. When I was going, I was also going as part of my UN work that I was telling you about before.
Back when you were a peace activist.
But I was going sometimes with really radical religious leaders, and we were getting them in rooms with the religious leaders who ended up signing the Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
And, in Israel, Palestine, a lot of times the religious aspect of the conflict is, in terms of having it be part of a solution, is completely overlooked. Not many people know that one of the biggest rabbis in Jewish history, Rabbi Ovadia Yosef, when he was the chief rabbi of Israel in 1979, he legislated a halakha, like a religious Jewish rule, that says that the sanctity of life is higher than the sanctity of land. And that was the religious grounds for Begin to sign the peace agreement with Egypt and evacuate settlements from Sinai. Evacuate Israelis from Sinai. And, you know, a lot of times it's the way it worked in Northern Ireland, if there wasn't the religious leaders who were highly appreciated and, you know, were legitimate to large constituencies that were also very, like, you know, nationalistic constituencies, they would have never been able to get into any kind of agreement. Speaking about it now, it's a little bit, you know, I'm cynical about it because you're seeing the radicalization and you're seeing the Ben Gvir and you're seeing the Smotrich and you're seeing the religious, like, fascist nationalists completely take over, you know, the Israeli society and the Israeli government. So it's hard to imagine it.
Yeah.
But to be honest, I really think that, I mean, if I want to stay hopeful, I would want to believe that when these fascists complete their complete gain of power, you know, religious nationalists, like, they will realize that there is no future for Jewish people on this land if they don't do things differently.
Right.
And if there is not equality from the river to the sea and full human rights and full equality between every, you know, all the people on this land. I hope that they will get to this conclusion, you know, when we are able to, like, save lives, because if they complete their vision, like, none of us will be able to be here or to even, you know, talk about what we're talking about.
I'm gonna still be on the couch.
You
guys travel around the world. I don't go nowhere. I'm just gonna be on the couch.
I don't know if you'll be able to be on this couch.
Oh, fuck. All right, then we gotta step it up.
So, how do we fix all this? What's your message to the world? What should we all be doing right now?
Did you save, like, the easiest question to the end?
I usually open with that for the guests, but we put it last for you.
How do we fix it?
Yep.
Well, first of all, we listen to the podcast, obviously.
For sure.
Step one.
Yeah.
In a serious way, we have to continue fighting. We have to continue doing everything that is in our toolbox and everything that we can, you know, to speak up, to challenge, you know, the power dynamics, to demonstrate, to, like, be the alternative that we think we want to see outside in what we say, in what we do, in what we write, in what we perform.
Should we boycott? As an Israeli, how do you feel about being boycotted?
You're welcome to boycott me. I mean, nobody...
No, we're not boycotting.
Not you personally.
I think it's going to be hard given that you're here, but...
If you think that boycott is an effective tool, then you should do that. For me, it's not like a tool that I can use. I mean, I boycott myself every day. I really give myself a hard time all the time. Like, Noam, stop. I cancel myself also. I write really bad comments to myself and everything. But yeah, I mean, I feel like we, each of us, like, have our different fights and different struggles. Like, I have to face my people, and also I speak to the Jewish diaspora, and also to, you know, to Arab-speaking audiences and to Palestinian diaspora. And I mean, we each have kind of what we can do. So I think that using it to the fullest and not giving up. A lot of people have gone quiet, and a lot of people have gone into despair. And I've done that too. Like, you can't always be, you know, on top of your game and everything. But we have to, you know, also strengthen one another.
Yeah.
You know, show each other support. Me, when I feel like I'm not alone, like when I see other people who are giving me support, and I give support back, and when I see that, oh, this person is on the right track, like, that's great what they're doing, it actually inspires me to keep on going. I know it can sound like a cliche, but it's true. So for me, it's a lifelong commitment. It's not something that I didn't start doing it yesterday and I won't stop doing it tomorrow. I think a lot of people deserve that we continue to speak up and fight, and it's getting harder and harder. But I think hopefully soon, let's say, even if I don't know if there will be a ceasefire or something will happen where there will be, like, less headlines on this topic,
Right.
people like us who care about it and have cared about it, you know, for a really, really long time, we're not going to disappear.
Yeah.
A lot of people will disappear and will go to the next thing,
Yeah.
or you know, we'll post about Diddy or whatever.
This guy over
I
here.
do both.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good
Yeah.
Diddy
It's
jokes.
Multitasking,
Yeah.
like.
Wars for oil, baby oil.
Yeah.
He's got it all.
Where is there more oil, in the Middle East or in Diddy's house?
Oh, it's
Wow.
about the same. It's about the same.
See,
Cases
so
and
there are
cases,
similarities.
Barrels and
Yeah.
barrels, yeah.
Yeah, it's a long-term run. We're in it.
Well, we appreciate you, and you know, we're always here to boycott you as much as you need, since you're boycotting yourself. We take turns we've been trying to boycott each other since we started the show.
When you said we'll be here, it actually sounded so believable that you're actually like staying on this couch.
I'm leaving as soon as we wrap this up. He stays. He sleeps on this couch.
Obviously, I'm never leaving the land. Once I'm on the land,
This
I'm
is
never
your-
leaving it.
Your promised couch.
It's my promise. This is my holy fucking couch. So, on that note, well, thank you for coming. We
Thank you so
appreciate
much.
you. Your comedian treachery is lovely, and we need more of it. The world needs more of it. And protests inside, outside. Well, we got you back.
Thank you.
Happy Friday night.
Yes.
Friday Night Semites. We out.